Good evening. Let me call to order the regular meeting of the St. Helena City Council for March 14th, 2017. Will the Vice Mayor lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mayor Galbraith.
Here.
Vice Mayor White.
Here. Councilmember
Doring.
Here.
Ellsworth.
Here.
Koberstein. Here.
Let me begin this evening with a few words about Juan Diaz. Juan was a longtime employee of our Public Works Department. He oversaw water distribution. Our old systems presented many challenges, and Juan was always up to them. He was a truly dedicated and gifted employee. He's going to be most missed. Now, I have here a few words from the Public Works Department that I'm going to read, and then from former Public Works Director John Ferens as well. From the Public Works Department. On May 3rd, 2017, we lost a great friend, co-worker, employee, and a brother, John M. Diaz. Juan M. Diaz. Juan worked for the city of St. Helena for 26 years, most of which were in the water department. Most of us will remember Juan repairing water leaks or dealing with dirty water complaints. Juan was much more than that. I'm sure everyone who got a chance to meet Juan knows what a great person he was and will always remember him for his leadership, dedication, and most importantly, his sense of humor. He was a mentor for all of us, not just for work, but how to see the silver lining through those tough times. And then the following message from John Ferens, but as it says here, it applies to all of us in the city. When you think about our friend Juan, remember yourself that our dear friend will never truly be gone. His spirit and energy lives on in each of us. As you go about your day making rounds, as you turn a valve, as you greet a customer, as you walk by his office, and when you hear someone singing on the job, pause and think of a funny Juan story or something he taught you. Then share it with your coworkers who are next to you. The lessons he taught and the laughter he brought will remain inside our hearts and minds and can be reflected each day in our own lives. In this way, Juan will never really be gone. He will live on. And so, in memory of Juan, let's have a brief moment of silence. All right, let us proceed with our agenda. The next item up is public forum. Does anybody wish to speak at public forum? This relates to matters not on our agenda, and comments are limited to 3 minutes. Yes, Ms. Dell.
Yes, my name is Pat Dell. I live at 25 San Juan Court, and I think this is the last time I'm going to be presenting this, but this is the petition from the St. Helena residents for fair water and wastewater rates. And we had turned in 112 signatures previously. We've added 112 for a grand total of 924.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. It's been a while since I've been up in front of you, but I've been asked to give you a brief update on the Vineland Station Hotel project. So let me just kind of read through what I've given to Noah here. But the Vineland Station Hotel project of 78 rooms or keys, along with several other use permits, were approved under a 10-year development agreement recorded in the Napa County records on July of 2012. That's a 10-year development agreement. At the time of the approval of the Vineland Station project, not only was the city in desperate need of looking for financial resources, but the entire country was in a financial turmoil, and at that point in time, it was not possible to obtain the financing for the project, and hence a delay in moving forward with the hotel. Today, financing is still difficult for small hotel projects, but far more available than it was when the Vineland Station was originally approved. I want to make it clear that we are moving ahead with the entire project at this time, and we're looking for hotel operators that will not only be successful, but a good fit for the city. Most operators are looking for at least 100 plus rooms. Our 78 keys with a 130-car underground garage facility make this a highly costly construction project, which limits the number of operators and financiers willing to take on this project. The value of St. Helena and its location with what is recognized as one of the premier wine regions in the world allows us to continue to have discussions with a handful of operators and financial partners that are interested and whom we believe have the ability to be successful in the St. Helena market. The Vineland Station Hotel project is an approved project, and we are continuing to move forward with the development of this project and the related use permit approvals. The Vineland Station Hotel, when completed, will provide a substantial financial benefit to the city in TOT, transient occupancy taxes, as well as generate benefits to the businesses in St. Helena. Thank you for letting me give you this brief update.
Thank you very much, Mr. Friedrich. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Any other further comment? Yes. Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yes, good
Museum.
afternoon. My name is Barrett Dahl. I'm the Executive Director of the Robert Louis Stevenson Museum, and I am asking today that we be considered for the agenda on March 28th for an art installation which we would like to install at the corner of Adams and Library Lane. This exhibition is done in collaboration with the students at Robert Louis Stevenson Middle School and will be inspired by Stevenson, featuring Stevenson, and show a great case of great spread of artwork by these original students. So I would like that to be added to the agenda next month.
All right. We'll certainly do that. And will you work with the city clerk to provide whatever information is needed so it can be properly...
Yes, that information has already been submitted, and I've also individually emailed each member of the city council. I've been working with the planning department for the last month.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? Okay, that takes us to reports by staff and city council. Let me begin with the city attorney, Mr. Brown, since we had a closed session, but to my way of thinking, there was no reportable action. Do you concur?
Well, you stole my thunder, Your Honor. The city council did meet this afternoon in closed session to discuss two items. There was no reportable action taken in either.
Mr. Pinnell?
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing this evening.
Ms. Mitz?
Just a reminder to the public and to city council members that on May 2nd, all day we'll be having our first, budget workshop. I'm so sorry, my words failed me. So that's on May 2nd.
All right. Ms. Black? Nothing else? Mr. House?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. I do have a few items I would like to touch on. As mentioned previously, our building official, Daryl Mays, has resigned and taken a position with another city. The city has contracted with Interwest, or essentially used Interwest through our existing contract to provide building inspection services to the public as well as plan check services. So generally, we don't anticipate to see significant impacts to the review and inspection of building permits within the city, but I do think it's worth noting and wanted the public to be aware of that. Obviously, there are always a little bit of challenges with someone who's a consultant and isn't in the office daily, but we will continue to provide inspection services on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays as we were previously doing. And we also expect to have the recruitment underway shortly for that position. In addition, I'd like to just give a brief update on a couple projects that are underway in the spirit of Mr. Friedrich providing an update on his Vineland Station hotel project, which I will say staff has been holding ongoing discussions with Mr. Friedrich regarding how to best implement the existing development agreement that has been approved by the council. In addition, it's worth noting about the Hunter subdivision project. Staff, in our review of the existing draft EIR, identified a few remaining issues that needed to be addressed in order to finalize that EIR and get it out for public review and comment. Staff has provided those comments to the consultant. Resolution of them obviously does require additional cost. We've forwarded those costs, anticipated costs, onto the applicant, Mr. Hunter, and are awaiting his response. So obviously we can't move forward with finalizing the document until they agree to cover the additional costs associated with it, and that's where we're waiting currently. And then also I'd like to just give a brief update on the 1000 Mills Lane Hotel project, which was submitted by Ted Hall. the owner of Farmstead. Originally, that application came in with a use permit covering both the Farmstead property and the Thousand Mills Lane site. That has since been revised or amended to only cover, the application has been amended to only cover the Thousand Mills Lane site, so reduced in scope slightly. Staff review is underway. And conversations with the CEQA consultant are also underway in order to finalize undergo and finalize the CEQA analysis required for that project. And we do expect to write an issues letter shortly to Mr. Hall, which identifies any remaining elements that need to be resolved prior to finalizing our analysis. Just to give a brief update on those projects to the public and the council to keep everyone informed.
All right, very good. Thank you. Ms. Smithies?
Thank you. I just wanted to give a brief plug on the wastewater treatment plant workshop being held on March 29th at the fire station from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. And it's going to be a brief overview presentation, about 10 minutes, and then some signs so you can see what the feasibility study and the results of the feasibility study that we're doing as part of the upgrades.
Okay, very good. Chief Bowden?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I just wanted to give everybody a fair warning. In direct response to some concerns from the community regarding traffic, the department's going to be conducting a directed enforcement campaign over the next 7 to 8 weeks in various locations around town, concentrating mostly on the roads that are used to commute through town, not necessarily just Main Street, and enforcing sections that maybe sometimes we don't always enforce, just to let people know that there's still laws, in addition to obviously speed, which has been a major complaint. Stop signs, pedestrian complaints, cell phones have been a big complaint, and taking vehicles through residential areas that are probably too big to be in residential areas, things like that don't normally get enforced on a everyday basis. The entire department is going to be participating, including myself and the lieutenant, and we will be concentrating on these areas for the next 7 or 8 weeks. You'll see us around specific times, specific dates, which we won't be letting people know about. But,
Come on, you can let us know.
As long as you're obeying the laws, you'll never even know we were there, except you'll see us pulling over the ones that weren't. So,
Okay, very good.
that's it.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's see. Ms. Koberstein, do you have anything?
Nothing.
All right. Mr. Ellsworth?
Just to remind members of the public that we have water in the back for anybody who needs it to feel comfortable and welcome here, particularly if you're going to speak. Sometimes it's a helpful thing, so it's in the back.
Okay, good. Mr. Doring?
Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, I'm on the LAFCO committee, the local agency formation commission. Yeah, a very bureaucratic, sort of esoteric organization. We had a strategic planning session on March 6th where we were led by a very fantastic facilitator, Mr. Bill Shiat. And it's interesting to know that LAFCO is now wanting to reinvent itself and become a vehicle for broader issues throughout the Napa Valley, like housing and agricultural preserve issues, growth. So we're just entertaining those discussions right now, and I think it's exciting. One of the things I spoke about was using our municipal service review process as a vehicle to discuss shared services with Up Valley agencies, and that was that prospect was very well received by the LAFCO Commission. So, these discussions will go forward. Unfortunately, my term on LAFCO is relatively short. Somebody, I believe, maybe the mayor knows, either from Yountville or Calistoga will fill that vacancy on May 1st. Our municipal service review draft report will be heard by LAFCO at the April 3rd meeting. So I don't foresee any controversial issues like Yountville. Yountville has some significant issues, but I don't know because I haven't reviewed the report. I don't have access to it at this moment, but I certainly will weigh in if necessary. And then on another topic completely different from that one, it would be helpful for me as a council member to have scheduled reports by our various local committees, our city committees, have the chairpersons come maybe, once a month, or not once a month, but schedule them over the next several months. I haven't heard from any of the committees in quite some time, and I think it would be helpful, maybe 2 per meeting over the next several months, just to kind of give an overview of what issues they're working on. I know that their meetings are open to the public, and sometimes they're well attended, sometimes not. Because I work and I'm in the courts most of the time, I'm not able to get to those meetings. So I think it would be helpful for our council to maintain and really strengthen that relationship with our volunteers who serve on these various committees. So be something to look forward to.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think our protocols actually require that they report from time to time, and we've been a little lax with respect to that. It's possible that our protocols require more paperwork than is really necessary. Oral reports probably would work well. So in any event, City Clerk was listening closely. Mr. White?
Tomorrow, the mayor and I will be attending the NVTA annual retreat, which will be held up at the Christian Brothers Retreat House up at Mount LaSalle. And we'll be discussing the Highway 29 Gateway project, so all the board members will weigh in on the section from Highway 37 up into the city of Napa, some possible capital improvements that will be going on there, and also discussing Measure 3, which is, I believe, an ABAG or an MTC funding mechanism that will I think, drop about $40 million into that area, and also some of the other jurisdictions. So stay tuned.
Mr. Mayor, if I could follow up on a comment made by Councilman Doring regarding the LAFCO Municipal Services Review. Director Hausch and I have been reviewing the document, and while it lacks 2 key chapters, I think it's fair to say that we're underwhelmed with the document at this date. And we'll be in close contact with the executive officer of LAFCO, trying to share our community's feelings with LAFCO and trying to introduce an element of flexibility that seems to be sorely lacking right now. Okay. More to follow.
All right, very good. Well, I assume once the draft is released publicly, it will be circulated to all council members. Is that absolutely okay? Good, and the public too. I mean, all right. I don't think I have anything further at this point in time. So that takes us to presentations and public recognitions, and it's Red Cross Month. And so let me read the. Are there representatives from Red Cross here? I think I see. Let me read your proclamation, and then you could say a few words.
Thank you.
Turn this around a little. American Red Cross Month, March 2017. Whereas, in St. Helena, we have a long history of helping our neighbors in need, American Red Cross Month is a special time to recognize and thank our heroes, those Red Cross volunteers and donors who give of their time and resources to help our community members. Whereas these heroes help families find shelter after a home fire, they give blood to help trauma victims and cancer patients, they deliver comfort items to military members in the hospital, they use their life-saving skills to save someone from a heart attack, drowning, or choking, they enable children around the globe to be vaccinated against measles and rubella. Whereas the American Red Cross depends on local heroes to deliver help and hope during a disaster, we applaud our heroes here in St. Helena and give of themselves in assisting their neighbors when they need a helping hand. Whereas across the country and around the world, the American Red Cross responds to disasters big and small. In fact, every 8 minutes, the organization responds to a community disaster, providing shelter, food, emotional support, and other necessities to those affected. It collects nearly 40% of the nation's blood supply, provides 24-hour support to military members, veterans, and their families, teaches millions life-saving skills such as lifeguarding and CPR, and through its Restoring Family Links program connects family members separated by crisis, conflict, or migration. Whereas we dedicate the month of March to all those who support the American Red Cross mission to prevent and alleviate human suffering in the face of emergencies, our community depends on the American Red Cross, which relies on donations of time, money, and blood to fulfill its humanitarian mission. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Alan Galbraith, Mayor of the City of St. Helena, by virtue of the authority vested me by the Constitution and laws of St. Helena and California, do hereby proclaim March 2017 as American Red Cross Month. I encourage all Americans to support this organization and its noble humanitarian mission, dated March 14, 2017. So there you go. Right there.
Can we have a Kodak moment?
A Kodak moment, sure. Open the word Kodak's basically just disappeared.
Isn't right. Thank you, Mayor Galbraith and City Council members. It's a privilege to be here, and I'm also with two local volunteers, Marjorie Arroyo, and Marcia Chiaro. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name very well. It's not very nice. Anyway, in the last year in the Napa County, I would like to just let you know of some of the activities we've been involved in. There have been 6 local home fires where we've provided help and hope to 7 families. One of the things that we're focused on, we had a large grant, National had a large grant for installation of 10-year smoke alarms, and to have a smoke alarm in your home can actually cut the amount of deaths in half. So this is a huge program that we're working on, and we've installed different groups to high-risk areas for smoke alarms, and we're going to be continuing doing it again next Saturday, actually, down in Napa. So eventually we'll get up to San Helena real soon. We've provided about 1,388 participants for 4-H, for first aid, CPR, and AED training, and other health and safety courses, as well as aquatic and water safety for 225 participants. And the other free program we have, which is under an hour, it's a presentation that we do, which is called Community Education Presentation. And we go out to different businesses or organizations and give an overview of how people can be better prepared individually for disasters. And we've covered several businesses and approximately 221 participants. And then we have a pillowcase project, and this was started and donated by the Disney Foundation, where they donate all these pillowcases with, of course, their insignia on it. And they're presented to third graders, and they get training on how to become better prepared for personal home disasters that might occur. And the fun part is after they have this education and they can decorate the pillowcase, they go home and they have to give their parents homework to say, okay, this is what you should have in your pillowcase. So that's really been a successful program as well. Throughout a worldwide network, the Red Cross provides 24-hour support to members of the military, veterans, and their families in war zones, military hospitals, and on military sorry. That is a personal relation. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, I didn't think that was going to affect me. But anyway, my youngest son is in special ops right now, and he's overseas. And so anyway, Red Cross is officially noted as the official communication for any kind of emergencies needed when military personnel are overseas. And so this year we have contacted and opened up 13 family cases and followed up with 17 families for those kinds of situations. Currently we have 35 members who are volunteers here in the Napa County, and I myself am a DAT responder and a board member, and without people like these lovely ladies over here, we wouldn't be able to provide the opportunities that we have when we work with local fire and CAL FIRE, City Fire and CAL FIRE, when we respond to home emergencies and disasters locally. So thank you very much, Mayor and City Council members, for letting us be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that takes us to our consent calendar, and I'll read off items on consent. Again, any member of the council or any member of the public can ask for an item to be removed. 7.1, consideration proposed approval of a resolution approving the Second Amendment in the amount of $15,900 to the professional services agreement with Green Valley Consulting for the design of Holmes Tank Upgrade Capital Improvement Project W-86. And with respect to the paperwork, there was a footnote on both page 1 and 2 that referred to the First Amendment when it should have said Second Amendment, so there's just a minor change there. 7.2, consideration of proposed approval resolution authorizing a budget transfer of $75,070 from Wastewater Reserves and authorizing the bulk purchase of 12,000 pounds of Ascorbic Acid for $90,201.60 from Integra Chemicals for treated wastewater dechlorinization. And with respect to 7.2, there's a revised resolution that simply corrects a typographical error. 7.3, approving the waiver of a tent fee in the amount of $477, encroachment permit fee in the amount of $200, and a noise permit in the amount of $25 for the St. Helena Volunteer Firefighters Association lobster feed fundraiser to be held on March 25, 2017. 7.4, consideration of proposed resolution approving an agreement with the City of Calistoga to provide reciprocal building inspection services. You'd like to pull which? 7.4, okay. So, at this point, the Chair would entertain a motion to approve on consent items 7.1 through 7.3.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Black?
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Coberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Now, with respect to 7.4, Mr. Hausch, do you want to introduce that, and then we'll hear from Ms. Manette.
Happy to give a brief overview. It's kind of interesting timing, given that Mr. Mays is no longer employed to the city. However, prior to even knowing that he was going to take another position, given that we only have one building official or very limited building staff in our department, and Calistoga operates under a similar kind of one-man shop for the building department, I had worked with the planning director in Calistoga to essentially create this reciprocal services agreement that allows us to share building official services when their building official would go on vacation or if our building official was sick. And the benefit is, you can imagine you have to schedule an inspection the day before. And so if someone were to call in sick, we don't know that they're going to be sick when the scheduled inspection occurs, or the inspection gets scheduled, I'm sorry. And so you can imagine if someone had ordered concrete, was ready to pour a foundation, and no one was there to inspect prior to that occurring, you can cause significant impacts on people's construction schedules and their cost. And so this agreement is intended to allow us to share building official services for very limited time frames, under very limited conditions, and with the ability for either city to opt out at any time. So it's essentially just a cover for unforeseen or planned absences for limited periods of time during the year in the event that we're not able to provide building inspection services or the city of Calistoga is not.
All right.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Manette, let me open the public hearing.
Well, your report kind of answered my question. I thought it was in response to our person leaving, and I thought that it was a great solution to share resources with other towns, which Councilmember Doring was speaking about with the LAFCO people. And I was just wondering why we needed a consultant in addition to the sharing, but I think what you've said makes sense, so that's why I was asking.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other public comment? All right. Any further council discussion? Is there a motion to approve 8.1?
Move approval. Second.
Ms. Black?
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Coberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. All right, that takes us to new business. The first item of new business is 8.1, consideration of proposed approval of a resolution appointing members to the Ad Hoc Utility Rate Committee. That's you, Ms. Black, but I think the...
If I could interject real quick.
Yes.
I just want to clarify that motion that it was to approve item 7.4.
Yes.
Oh, the last one, yes.
Yes, it was mentioned 8.1. I just wanted to clarify that it was 7.4.
7.4, okay.
Did you say 8.1?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Oh, I just...
Okay. In any event, that takes us to 8.1, new business. And this relates to the appointment of members to the ad hoc committee. As a preliminary matter, the city, when it advertised, said that the committee would consist of 5 St. Helena community members. The staff report notes that was not previously discussed by the council. But let me begin by asking the council whether 5 members is agreeable to everybody. Does anybody have the position?
Depends on the 5.
I was going to actually suggest that we have 7. I think we're asking people to do some pretty intensive work and analysis in a fairly short period of time, and they may not all be able to attend all the meetings, and I think more members will facilitate greater input and participation. I also think it gives us an opportunity for more diversity on this committee in terms of gender, age. We have 3 younger men who have applied, something that doesn't occur that often. People bring varying amounts of experience and types of experience to the table. Different income levels could be represented. So I would like to see more than 5 people on this committee.
All right. Mr. Doring, do you have a feeling one way or the other?
Well, the good news, we're blessed to have 13 excellent applicants, so that's really great for St. Helena. And I kind of share the idea, there may be a time where one member may not be able to appear, and it would be nice. I'd be okay with 7, given the strength of the pool that we have, frankly.
Right.
So I'm okay with that.
Mr. White?
That's fine with me.
All right. It's certainly Mr. Ellsworth.
Yes, I agree. That's a good idea.
Okay, certainly fine with me. So we will appoint 7. All 7 will be full participants. There will be no alternates. At this point, let me see whether there's a further council discussion before I invite applicants, if they wish to make a statement, to make a statement. And nobody should feel he or she needs to make a statement, because we've read through the applications, all of which contain the meaningful substantive information. So let me open the public hearing. Does any applicant wish to speak? Yes.
My name's Anthony McCallum, and I'm not an applicant,
Right.
but I was wondering, is the council going to give us the 13 names, or just the 7 you're going to approve?
The 13 names are public record. They're
they
in
are.
the staff
Thank you.
report, yes. Any further?
I'm here, so I might as well say something. Mark Smithers, 1819 Vallejo Street. My application, I think, more or less speaks for itself. I have been in town for 28 years. I have a background in finance and accounting and large, complex situations. I think this is somewhat complex. I think there's regulatory issues, but I think it's also, a giant spreadsheet on financing and cash flows and activities, and certainly, a number of other things that are related to that as far as the regulations that need to be taken into consideration to come up with something that's reasonable for everybody and to review what's already been determined. So I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm just really here to help the city and the council, get through this and review it again for the benefit of the folks that have asked for it to be reviewed. So I'm here to help if you want me.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further comment? Well, let me close public comment. And it falls on the mayor to nominate, and the process we use is that I nominate, we see if we have a second, and then we have a discussion. And so let me begin. My first nominee would be Bonnie Long, former city administrator, and she has certainly a significant background in water and wastewater, including rates.
I'd second that.
Is there any discussion?
I think Bonnie is an excellent choice. She understands the city. She has public works experience. And she actually began the permit process for removal of that dam. And I think that should be an excellent member of this committee.
All right. Any further discussion?
I would agree with Councilmember Coverstein, and I'd like to see Bonnie get a second chance at closing that dam project.
All right. Is there a motion to accept Bonnie Long?
How about we make a final motion at the end? How about we have a consensus?
I would prefer to do it one by one. Otherwise, it's going to get confused, and then we can have a final motion at the end with those that have been previously approved.
Okay.
So we'll start with Bonnie Long. Is there a motion and a second?
Second.
Ms. Black?
Second. Who seconded? I'm sorry.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Coverstein.
Yes.
Ellsworth.
Yes.
Doring.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. My second nominee would be Tom Vance. Mr. Vance is a consulting engineer. He's been a member of the local group that has requested the city to reconsider the rate hikes, and I certainly know Mr. Vance from other work he's done for the city, and I'm convinced he can be objective in his analysis despite his involvement in seeking a reconsideration of the rate hikes. So I would nominate Mr. Vance.
I would second that.
Is there any further discussion?
I just have one comment. I think that this group has largely brought us to this point tonight. Representing over a third of our ratepayers, they've asked us to undertake this review. I think they should have proportionate representation on the committee. I think they deserve seats at the table and not just merely in the audience. I personally would hope we would appoint 2 of them. But in any event, through their meaningful participation, I think we'll get to the end point we want, which is community acceptance of the outcome here, whatever it is.
All right.
And I support the appointment of Mr. Vance.
Any further discussion? Is there a motion to appoint Mr. Vance?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Black?
Councilmember Doring.
Yes.
Coverstein.
Yes.
Ellsworth.
Yes.
White.
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. My third nominee is Chris Dan. I must say I did not know Mr. Dan at all before he applied, but I met with him, and I'm impressed by his very strong expertise in cost of service rate setting, and I think he would bring really a profound knowledge of the process. We're lucky to have a person like that in the city to this committee. So my next nominee is Chris Dan.
I would second that.
Is there any further discussion?
I didn't have an opportunity to meet with him. I'd like to hear what other people say or know about him.
Well, I know Chris Dan from, I know he's an energy expert, does a lot of presentations all over the world, consulting on a number of different, actually pricing for utilities, and he's lived here for quite a while. Seen his kids grow up.
Well, I've nominated, and there's been a second, so let's see whether is there any further discussion? Let's see whether he gets a third vote. Ms. Black?
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes.
Councilmember Doring.
No.
White.
Yes.
Ellsworth.
Yes.
Coverstein.
No.
Okay. So he's nominated.
Yes.
My next nominee is Lester Hardy. Lester is a former member of the City Council. He's obviously knowledgeable about Proposition 218, and I think it's very important for the committee to have a person who is knowledgeable about Proposition 218. And Mr. Hardy's obviously a well-known figure in town, so he's my next nominee. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right.
I just wanted to mention something about Prop 218 since that came up, and I do think it's good to have an expert in that. I rewatched the November 29th tape, and Catherine Hansford had mentioned that tiered water rates can be done if a city demonstrates that providing that service to certain customers demands it. It's not a law that you cannot have tiered rates. It's that the city has to show why they're tiered, and so I think having somebody who is knowledgeable in Prop 218 is critical. Yeah. So I think that's a good choice.
All right, I'm not going to respond to the substance of what you say other than to say that we both agree that Proposition 218 is an important consideration, and to have someone who has real experience there will benefit the committee. So at this point, Ms. Black?
Can I just say one thing about Lesser?
Oh, no.
When I met with him and we talked about this, he described this whole process a little bit like peeling back the layers of an onion. And I really... it really resonated with me because, to me, it means he's going to approach this with the kind of deliberative, inquisitive, analytical view that it deserves. So I'm very happy to have him on the committee after we vote.
All right.
Don't start crying.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
My fifth nominee is Joel Gott. I don't think he requires any description, apart from the fact that he has an exceptionally strong financial background, which will benefit the committee. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion of Mr. Gott? Ms. Black?
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Doring?
No.
All right. My sixth nominee is Doug Cutting. He's a software engineer. He has a young family here in town. I think it's important to have one or two members with young families on the committee, and so I would nominate Mr. Cutting.
Second.
Any further discussion? Ms. Black?
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Koberstein?
Yes.
My next nominee is Jack Stewart. I think it's important that the committee have at least one member of the prior committee who is there, who can talk to and speak up and explain why the prior committee took the position that it did. Mr. Stewart really led the ad hoc committee when it was reconvened for purposes of looking at water and sewer rates. By the way, that prior ad hoc committee was a 7-member committee, just as this one is too. So my next nominee would be Jack Stewart. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I'd just like to say that I do agree that it's important to have that continuity. I felt that the previous ad hoc committee did not ask enough questions about our water system and did not dig deep enough. And while I'd be supportive, I just want this exercise to be absolutely thorough about our resources. And so I will, that's my comment.
All right. Any further comment about Mr. Stewart?
Yeah, I have a comment. I view this as an exercise where we have fresh eyes that look at some issues. I mean, I don't believe we're here to defend what the prior committee did, and we're not here to attack the rate study. And we're really just looking in depth at a couple of the issues that people are concerned about. And I'm not sure where you're going with the rest of your choices, but there are other names that I would like to hear, and I'm inclined not to support this nomination.
All right. Any further discussion? Ms. Black, let's see whether Mr. Stewart gets 3 votes or not.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
No.
Koberstein?
No.
Ellsworth?
No.
All right. My next nominee would be Mr. Smithers. He spoke. He has obviously a very strong financial background, just as Mr. Gott, and he would be my next nominee.
Second.
Any further discussion? Ms. Black?
Excuse me, Mayor Galbraith.
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Now, I want to thank everybody who applied here. It was an exceptional group. The choices were...
Still have one more.
No. I do?
We have seven.
Yeah.
That's seven.
What am I-
We have seven.
That's seven.
Oh.
That's seven. I've
Who
got,
did I not write down?
I will come up with a comprehensive motion here. Maybe I should do that first, then thank everybody.
I only have six.
The motion is to, the overall motion based upon the votes would be to approve Bonnie Long, Tom Vence, Chris Dan, Lester Hardy, Joel Gott, Doug Cutting, and Mark Smithers. That is seven. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Black?
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
All right. So again, it was an exceptionally strong group that applied, and I must say that in talking with folks, we do have, we're going to have a residents also that we're going to appoint to a committee to help us with the selection of the new city manager, and certainly some of those who applied for this committee and who did not make it are under, will be highly considered by me for the next committee. We have very good people that are wishing to volunteer their time for the city, and I most appreciate it. So, in any event, thanks everybody.
I have a question.
Yes.
The last committee, I think you and Peter both attended. I don't know if you were.
Yeah, I've looked at the
members,
the protocols are very clear that that no member of the city council should be a member of these committees. And yes, it's true that the vice mayor and I attended, but it's also true that we were pretty quiet.
Well, I was just wondering, my question was not to want to get on this committee to vote, but whether we should have council representation at the meetings.
My thinking is that members of the council, if they wish to go, my thinking is that members of the council, if they wish to go, should go as public members.
If three of us go, can we ask questions? And
The rule is that you may observe but not participate.
if two of us go, may we ask questions?
Yes, and in the past, the council has designated one or more members to act as a liaison to some of its committees, and I don't know whether the council is interested in doing that with respect to this one, but there is precedent for that.
Well, I would like to go back to our protocol, which is adopted here, if I can find it. It says here, membership and committee structure, and I'm looking at the City of St. Helena Protocol for Committee, Commissions, and Boards, and this was formally approved by the City Council on July 8th, 2014, and is part of our City Council orientation book. It says, City Council members and staff shall not sit as members on any committee. However, the City Council may, in its discretion, appoint two members in the composition of a City Council subcommittee for a specific purpose. I'm not sure how that relates to the first sentence, quite frankly.
Typically, what my recollection is that the council has designated members to act as liaison to your various boards and committees. I believe that doing so is consistent with that provision because the council members would not be acting as members of that committee, but rather would be acting as simply as an oversight that would be able to report back more readily to the city council.
Well, if the City Council wishes to go down that road, I'm happy to have it go down that road.
I think it would be useful, keep us from Brown Act violations if three of us happen to show up and somebody wants to talk. And, you know.
What's the road we're going down? I've lost. I'm lost.
Designating two City Council members to attend the meetings of the ad hoc committee.
That's fine with me. I'm not going to be one of those participants, I don't believe.
Well, my suggestion would be that the two participants be the mayor and Ms. Coberstein. Does that
would
work
agree.
for everybody?
Yes.
Sure. I'll
All
go to
right.
meetings with you.
Do we need a motion to that effect?
Well, we may need a motion to that effect, but I have another piece to this puzzle. I think it would be very helpful to have a written report at the end of the meeting
I think that's
with recommendations.
I don't think that's agendized for this meeting, and I think we should agendize a discussion of the ad hoc committee and what our expectations of it are at our next meeting.
There you go.
Fair enough.
I also think that, again, apropos of the Brown Act, that it would be appropriate to also agendize the issue of designating the liaison group as well for another meeting, because it's not agendized for this evening's meeting.
I knew I was jumping ahead of myself. Okay. Thank you.
I'd like to take a moment to thank all of the applicants and encourage them to attend the meetings and stay involved and ask questions. Just because these members were appointed does not mean your work and your interest is not valuable to our committee, because I certainly think it is. So those who did not get selected, please stay involved. Please give your energy and time to our community. Thank you.
I think we all agree with that sentiment. All right. That takes us to 8.2. Consideration of proposed approval resolution authorizing the use of general fund reserves, the amount of $45,665, and authorizing the interim city manager to execute a contract with Bread of Life to provide services related to good governance project for the city of St. Helena for a total amount not to exceed $45,665. And let me turn that over to Mr. Pennell, at least to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to correct one statement in my staff report where I said under background, City Council has requested hiring a consulting firm to conduct a City Council retreat. That's not true. That's not the case. I've had individual discussions with several members, but the Council has not formally entertained this topic today. That being said, I have been your interim city manager for almost 2 months now, and I have had the opportunity, an enjoyable opportunity, to observe the council working together, sometimes with a little friction, sometimes with a little more friction. And it became apparent that it's easier for me as your interim to ask that you consider conducting a good government retreat, if you will, for the purposes that I've stated in my staff report, to learn more about your colleagues' goals, aspirations, and backgrounds, so that deliberations can be more productive and perhaps enhance the understanding of each member's position on the items that we take under advisement or take action on every other Tuesday evening. I became aware of Jean Holstein's Dynamic Dialogue, or Bread of Life consulting firm, and had her come to the City Hall and make a presentation. And I've taken the liberty of inviting her to address the City Council this evening, with your permission, Mr. Mayor, to outline a proposal that's contained in your agenda packet. If you have no objection, I'd like to introduce Jean Holstein.
Sure, by all means. Ms. Holstein, our pleasure.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Let me just say that I'm getting older, and this time change thing is killing me. So if I don't make sense, stop me, because honest to God, it's just harder this year for some reason. So, having said that, let me also do a little disclosure here. I'm an attorney. I am on inactive status with the California State Bar because I found this, and most of my career was spent in litigation with cities and planning commissions and counties and the state, because I was a land use and environmental attorney. So let me just tell you that never did sue St. Helena. So we're okay. We're clear here. I also won a lot, But let me just tell you, they were hollow victories. And that's why I do the work I do now. Because often when you're dealing with land use, when you're dealing with city issues, there are very rarely bad guys and good guys, although we look at each other that way. But really, what a healthy city needs is almost always all of the perspectives and the opinions, and part of what is really a struggle for the elected officials and the city staff is how do you balance all these different interests. I started doing this dialogue work because I really believe that together, if we can get in a room and learn how to let down our armor a little bit, that we can figure out any problem that we have. But we don't know how to do that very well. We don't know how to listen very well. We don't know how to speak our truth and listen to somebody else's without thinking of the argument that we've got in our heads about how you're wrong while we're listening. And that is really the work that we do. So let me just tell you that part of the dream and part of the reason I'm here is that I did some open trainings. I do open to the public trainings about this dialogue stuff. And in one of the first trainings I did here was Katerina, I believe her name was, former city council person.
Katerina Sanchez, sure.
She said, "Oh my God, I wish this was a part of the city council training. This stuff would be so valuable. Oh my gosh, this would be incredible." So that got me thinking about it, and I've had a number of people say that in other places. The idea and the goal is to get people to know each other. You go through elections, and I'm not sure what it was like here, but I can tell you that in this country, we are not doing well with our elections. What we're doing is we're repolarizing our issues again and again and again, and we're getting to a place where we become less human beings and more positions, and this doesn't serve anybody. The opportunity here is for people to get to know each other, talk about what kind of information do you need to make the decisions, right? What is your motivation? What does it mean for you to be a leader? What's your personality style a little bit like? So some of us want like tons of details and a lot of information on it. Some of us want to know, oh my gosh, what's that going to project into the future? Some of us are right now today. Some of us are bringing the past in. If we don't know that about each other, we can start fighting over things that really are not that important and that really go back to we don't have trust built, we don't have relationships. So having had a new election, the idea would be to start with the city council members and spend a good part of a day together getting to know each other. Who are you? How long have you been here? And hearing that from your other city council members and your interim city manager, so that all of the stuff you might have heard from third parties, you might decide, you know what, they aren't really like that. But also learning about how you make decisions. And this isn't about making decisions or talking about the business of the city. It's talking about how do we want to relate to each other. I mean, what if you guys could actually have truly open conversations with each other that modeled what we would like to see in our federal government right now or our state government right now? You have the opportunity to do that. And the stakes are higher here in a sense, and here's what I mean by that. When you have a contentious relationship with each other, you're in a small town. You're going to see each other at the grocery store. Your kids might be on sporting teams together. You might know each other. And that can make it so hard and so challenging. And also, you can lose connection with your citizens and your stakeholders. So the proposal was to start with the city council, do some kind of getting to know each other connection, move that then into the city staff. Because you're in the process of recruiting a new city manager, it can be really helpful to get the staff talking about what's working for them, what isn't, are there changes that they'd like to see, the same kinds of decision-making pieces. How do we do our work together? What's helpful? What blocks us? How do we engage as civil servants with elected officials? To really have some time together to talk about that can be extraordinarily valuable and can decrease some of the tension and anxiety that I would be feeling if I was looking at a new city manager. So that's the second piece. And then the third one is to say, okay, could we take some of this information that we've learned about how to connect with each other and about each other and bring it into some open forums? It's clear from the water issue that there are ways that communication is not happening well with some of your citizens. There are ways to improve that. Are there ways that you could, certainly meeting the Brown Act, be in the room having open conversations with people? And that would be the third phase of this. So that's, in brief, the proposal that you have in front of you. What I brought, and I brought, I think, copies for each of the council members, or you can make copies, is we did this work in the government of Alberta. And there was actually enough in that particular project to have an independent outsider do an evaluation of the changes that happened in government from bringing in this dialogue work and changing the engagement. So I brought a copy of that, and then also the practice of mindful leadership. So before we developed dynamic dialogue, we were doing a process called contemplative dialogue and active engagement. And I saw an email that Wendell Laidley sent, I think, to everybody here, where he talks about the contemplative dialogue is the name that he used. So these are documents that are evaluative and describe some of the benefits. And then also, here's the thing, bread of life. Oh my God, doesn't it make you think about a church or something? So we often get this, are you a faith-based organization? We are not. We are a 501c3 for charitable and educational purposes. We use bread of life because it is a core, bread is a core piece of most of our human lives, right? It's like a daily, at least it was when I was a kid. I think it's changing because now we're gluten-free and all that other stuff. But it used to be, when we started 20 years ago, an actual staple and something that many of us couldn't imagine getting through a day with. So we use that word. There is a spiritual element to some of the other programs that are offered, but it's a very open, it's not one faith tradition. So just to get that out of the way, but I'm open to any questions or concerns or whatever you might have.
Well, let me begin by asking you whether you've done this with other city councils.
I have not done it with the city council yet, no.
Okay. I mean, I think you present an interesting proposal. My real concern is how this works in conjunction with the Brown Act. I have serious doubts that it can really work given the Brown Act, because, for example, I have a hard time understanding how it is that we could discuss contentious issues that are specific to the city in the context of trying to get to know one another, quote, better, end quote. To me, that would pose a serious Brown Act problem if it was not agendized. I mean, that's kind of the problem that I have here. And I'm going to ask the city attorney to think about this and not respond right now, but let me hear. And I realize you're not practicing law because you're inactive just like I am. So,
yes.
Okay.
We're kind of active inactives, aren't we? Yeah. So my understanding is, and I think the beginning part, that first day, is absolutely not talking about the contentious issues. It is talking about who you are, how you approach decision making, and then really what we do is we teach some concepts and skills for communication, and then we practice them. So it's not about dealing with a current issue that's going on with the city, at least that first day. My guess is that there are ways that we can work with the Brown Act issues so that we're not dealing with current city business. And that's exactly what would happen. Or we would have to do it in the way that would meet the Brown Act. And I've got friends that are experts on it. I think your city attorney would be somebody we'd actually work with. I don't think that the idea is to violate any laws while we're trying to get you to work together better.
I would hope not.
Yeah. I think that would be sort of counterproductive.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Other council questions, inquiries?
I guess one question that I have, I couldn't quite boil down how many days, how many meetings that we would need to have, and because I'm just about meetinged out. Just, gosh, the next 3 months are pretty full.
So the way we do any of these proposals is we line out what we think the whole thing would be, and we take it step by step. So at the end of the first day, if you say this was of no value and we don't want to do anymore, you're done. You know, we're going to prove ourselves to you, or we're going to say, gosh, we're not a good fit. So that's number one, which means that if there are any further, they would be scheduled by you.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the council?
I think learning to communicate with each other is essential. I realize the Brown Act can be kind of isolating, but if the city attorney, the city manager look at it and say, if we're not going to be discussing substantive issues, if there's a way to set it up to at least have one day of learning to understand each other, and I think the qualifications that you bring as somebody who's an attorney with a land use background, so there's some relation to what we're dealing with, even if we're not talking about the specific issues. I think there's a value to that. I think that there's some miscommunication. There's some work to be done. It's difficult to do. It's in towns, in families, in businesses. Learning to communicate is important. It's really important, and I see value in it.
Ms. Goberstein? Again, we can have a council discussion, but do you have any specific questions?
Have you done this with staff before?
Yes.
And can you describe how that's gone, and also with the general public?
Yeah. So these two reports will also describe to you how it's gone with staff, public sector staff especially. Usually what happens in the first day-long thing is that any tensions just decrease, because it's much more about who you are, what's important to you, what's going on, and learning about each other. There is much more that we have in common as human beings, and so a lot of that first day is about that, and you begin to look at each other a little differently. And then there's some skills and tools that we ask you to practice with. So it's different ways that you can become aware of what's happening, what's blocking you, way you're thinking. Honestly, the biggest part is what goes on between our ears. In this little zone, just can be so dangerous. But this is about really saying, okay, what am I doing? How am I, oh my God, look at, oh gosh, he's got his hand up there. I think he's thinking this, right? Oh, she's doing, oh my God. But you don't realize how much you're doing that, and then how much you're telling yourself that's the truth of what's going on. So we work with that kind of stuff, and often that can start a process of just ease, and then we move into, okay, now what's going on? So with staff especially, we have more wiggle room. We can actually deal with some of the challenges that have been happening in day-to-day life, or maybe something that happened 5 years ago that still has a lot of life. Maybe even a bunch of the people weren't even here when it happened. But boy, it's still there and active. So we can talk about some of those and see what I mean? And so, we can choose to let go of some of that stuff. And it's learning the skills and the practices to do that. So with staff, oh my gosh, I can tell you that it's amazing. Now, it might take a little bit. It depends on what's going on here. If there's a lot of angst, or like the room is so full of elephants we can hardly see each other, it might take a little while to clear them out. But we spend the time doing it, and so we've got tons of experience working with staff. I also have a list of references, and they're public sector references, so you can feel free to call these folks and see if I'm like telling the truth or not, which is always a good thing to check. But does that answer? Yeah.
about with the general public? That's sort of like phase 3 of what you're
Yeah.
proposing.
Oh, my gosh. So I've been doing some open public dialogues and inviting folks in and creating some processes where people really can talk to each other. When the council and or city are trained, it can go so much smoother. It's an opportunity for folks to really be honest with each other in an environment where you're not allowing it to get out of hand.
But here's the problem, as I see it. Given the Brown Act, there's no way we can do that, even if we were willing, hypothetically, to, quote, let our hair down, end quote. There's no way you can do that privately. It has to be in a public meeting. It has to be noticed. And then people in the public are going to have what would be afforded an opportunity to comment on your comments with your hair down. I mean, that's the problem I'm having with what you're doing in the context of a group like ours that must operate under the Brown Act. And that was what went to my question. Have you done this before other city councils? The answer was no, because I would have loved to have heard how it worked in the context of a group that really is subject to the Brown Act. That's the question I have.
So in those public forums, if the city council members were there, that would have to be noticed. It would be open to the public. It would be noticed. It would be agendized. So say you're dealing with like the water rate issue. We would design a process, maybe a couple-hour forum, where folks could actually interact with each other, not in this formal setting.
Well, we can do that through workshops, but I was getting to your first meeting where you were staying away from city business, and each of us is going to talk about ourselves and our expectations and how we approach decision making and all the rest. But it would be in the context where the public would be there. It's not like we can do this just among ourselves and say, I wish Mr. Ellsworth, whom I've known forever, you thought this way rather than that way, or Mr. Mayor, I wish you thought this way rather than that way. I cannot see that kind of conversation happening in public. That's the problem.
So what I'm saying is, first you're developing relationships amongst each other, right? Then you choose. You choose whether or not you're going to openly engage each other when you're at the city council meeting. My guess is, and here's my hope, is that you will ask each other a lot more questions, and even more probing questions. Help me to understand. Or even, I'm wondering if you're representing the citizens group as you're bringing these things forward. Let me just check that out. I'm wondering if you have thought about this perspective at all.
Well, I don't think we have much difficulty here asking questions about whether you thought about this perspective or not. I certainly think we don't generally ask, are you representing a specific group? We expect all members of the City Council to be speaking in the context of their fiduciary duty to the city as a whole. I mean, certainly that, to my way of thinking, is true of every person that's sitting at this desk and has been. So I'm baffled, quite frankly, about this. I'll be quite blunt about it. Anyway, are there further questions?
No questions.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further council discussion? Mr. Brown, what's your perspective here?
Well, the short answer is I think it can be done consistent with the Brown Act. I've seen it done in other cities, and it's typically done in a way that is similar. Your Honor mentioned the workshop setting, and a variation of that I've seen done, and I believe that can be done consistent with the requirements of the Brown Act. You are absolutely correct that anytime the council meets together, even to discuss how you get along, you have to have the public there. So it can't be that there is, to some extent, I think there can be the concern that candor might be diminished by that. But it's not always so, and I have seen, as I said, I have seen this done in other cities. You're absolutely correct that if the conversations focus too much on specific issues or specific projects before the city council, those can't continue without having that specific item included on the agenda for the public to see, posted either 72 or 24 hours in advance, depending on whether you're doing it as a regular or a special meeting. But it's my view that this kind of activity can happen consistent with the Brown Act. You just need to be a little careful.
And does the city attorney typically attend these sessions as well?
It's not a bad idea.
It's also, it also adds to the cost. Any further council discussion?
Should we?
Oh, yeah, let me open it up to the public. I'm sorry. Any public comment?
I just hate being short, but at this point in my life, there's nothing I can do about being short. I don't talk as fast as Gene, but there's quite a bit I want to say, so I'm going to talk faster than I ordinarily do. Mayor Galbraith, City Council, I heartily recommend that you sign this contract with Jean Holston. I've had personal experience with her workshop. I took her workshop about 4 years ago, 4 full days. We started out with a large group of people, and the first thing I did is look to my left, and I poked the person next to me, someone that you know here, and I said, "Oh my God, Wendell Laidley's down there." And Wendell Laidley and I were famous for getting up in city council meetings and criticizing each other and disagreeing with each other vehemently. As a result of those 4 days, Wendell and I spent the better part of 18 months meeting about 2 or 3 times a month and using the techniques that Jean Holston taught us. Now, I can't tell you that Wendell and I agree on everything now, but I can tell you what it's all about is relationship. And I can tell you that Wendell and I have a very fine relationship. I honestly can say that my feelings of him would be absolutely affectionate. I think he's a fine man, and I would have never gone there otherwise, believe me. So the name of that group was Contemplative Dialogue, and I don't know why it was contemplative, because we didn't sit and meditate, I can assure you. There was nothing passive about it. There was really active discussion. We broke up in small groups, and we talked about topics that I talked with somebody that's absolutely opposed to affordable housing. I'm an affordable housing advocate. It was a great exercise. The other thing on a business side of this contract is I read the contract. I read the staff report. I think it's a great contract because it gives you all kinds of flexibility. As Ms. Holston said, you can have one meeting and say, whoops, this isn't a good fit. Let's not do it. But I would urge you to at least try it. And then I'm going to read a couple things from the booklet from Communicative Dialogue. I looked at it tonight, and this is on one of the first pages. Relationships are all there is. Everything in the universe only exists because it is in relationship to everything else. Nothing exists in isolation. We have to stop pretending we're individuals, that we can go it alone. From Margaret Whitley. And then secondly, because you're all leaders, you are our leaders. We voted for you and elected you to be our leaders. From Mohandas K. Gandhi. I suppose leadership at one time meant muscles, but today it means getting along with people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dell. All right.
Thank you.
Grace Kistner. I wasn't going to say anything other than I was sitting on the other side of Pat and Mr. Laidley, and I will tell you that we're now taking a class over at the Uranda House, and Pat and Wendell and I sit together every Friday afternoon.
Okay.
Well, I was really moved by that presentation, and I think that trust comes from being vulnerable to some extent. I think it's a big piece of it. And what's being suggested here is that you as leaders are willing to be vulnerable and open in front of the public. And if everyone can learn to be vulnerable and open with each other and as a way to trusting each other, I just think your role in this is essential to model it for us. The leadership, as you can tell, really sets the tone. And also in terms of, letting your hair down to the extent that anyone has hair,
Thank you. After that comment, I could see more of a need for this.
Got to have some humor here. Well, Geoff is not far behind, but whatever. And men seem to have less hair than women, but not always. I just want to suggest that what is actually going on between you guys and internally in you guys, the public have all sorts of opinions about already. And this would simply be giving the public some real information about it. It's not like nothing's known or assumed. So, I don't think there's anything, that's really secret, and it's not about exposing secrets. It's about being open and honest, which can allow real affection and love, dare I say the word, as we work with each other in our community that we all love and want to be loved in. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, any further public comment? I'll close the public comment and invite any further council discussion. And it may be that the council doesn't need to make a decision tonight. It may be that you will want to continue it and take a look at some of the references and some of the other information that's been brought forward. I just throw that out as a possible alternative. Well, I'll go first. Let me, when I look at this proposal, just the way it's put together, Goal 1, activity, a kickoff one-day retreat. And that's a kickoff retreat with the City Council and Interim City Manager for the purpose of developing positive working relationships. This is not contemplating in the proposal that it would be a public meeting with the public there. Goal 2, kickoff retreat with city staff. Now, that, I assume, is not governed by the Brown Act and doesn't pose a problem. Goal 3, public engagement. And here's where the public finally comes in. After the council and staff had at least 2 retreats, the public will be invited to attend open communication meetings with the council and staff present. So my problem with this proposal is that it builds up from Goal 1 to Goal 2 to Goal 3, but Goal 1 involving the City Council, to my way of thinking, is inconsistent, incompatible with the Brown Act, and I continue to have trouble seeing how this exercise can really work in terms of putting down your hair with the public there and commenting on your comments. I find that very difficult to swallow. That's the problem I have. That's my view of it at the moment.
Well, I have a different view. I don't think it could be possibly more embarrassing than us sitting up here in front of the public every other week and having them wonder, where are we coming from, and why is she asking that question, or why is this happening? In my lifetime, during my work experience, one of the most productive things I did was meet with the other department directors and our manager and learn about each other and who we were and how we approached decisions. Some people, they want to just get to the goal and that's what's driving them to complete a task. Some people have a more overall view of how you get someplace or what you have to do before you can even make a decision. And I'm willing to risk that we'll go someplace and 3 or 4 people might show up and watch what's happening, but I think the exercise is worth it. I want to thank Councilmember Doring for bringing this issue to us originally in January, and also, frankly, Larry for not being a city manager who's just sitting here biding time, doing nothing for 2 or 3 months, but having the courage to bring this to us to discuss and seeing that it would be helpful to us to work together as a group. And lastly, I would mention that one thing we heard over and over and over again at our goal-setting session was communication. There's a communication problem here in town, and to the extent that this can help us communicate with each other and also communicate with the public and our staff. They're probably frankly wondering about some of us and where we're coming from, I absolutely support it.
Mr. Doring?
Well, thank you, Mary, for those comments. There's no doubt that I fully support the concept. I can appreciate your reservations, knowing you as well as I know you. I'm not surprised, Mr. Mayor, but we can bring you along. We can bring you along.
We couldn't get you to
You probably never thought you were going to dance at your daughter's wedding, but I bet you did, right?
She made me, yes, of course.
And in many ways, we're lawyers, and our brains are similar in some regards. So I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm obviously very cognizant of the cost. But I know Gene. I've worked with Gene before, and I could attest to the fact that we will all get something beneficial. And if after the first day or so, or half day, it's a no deal, it's not going anywhere, then it's not going anywhere. We cut it off. I think you'll be, as Wendell Lately was, and others that I know in the groups that have been formed here in town over the years, there were a lot of folks who were surprised by their ability to take a leap forward. And I'm one of those folks. I think it's critically important. It's the most important thing that we can do. And I've said that, people go, because what it is, what we're saying is that we are willing to become the model for how we communicate in the community. If we could get some basic training, and it's not judging, it's not good or bad, it's getting better, that the community will see that and take the lead with that. I'm absolutely convinced that it's good. And I think it sends a signal to the next city manager that we're willing to work on governance issues and communication issues. And it sends a message to staff that we care about our staff and we care about communication. Everything about this is going to be beneficial in my view. So I am fully supportive of this concept, as risky and kind of weird as it is. It is kind of different. But it's really just a different form of team building. Almost every organization, public or private sector, does this. We have these fancy names here, but that's really what it is. But I trust this process because I've been through it. So that's what I know. So I'm a convert, and I would commend this program to our council. And as I said, if it doesn't work out, we turn it off.
Mr. Ellsworth?
I concur with that. I think that bringing up the cost of it is important. There is a cost to it, but I'm thinking the cost of not learning to communicate might be even higher. I think that it was brought up, trust and vulnerability. There's the council, staff, the community, and we're all in this together. And if we don't take the opportunity to try, and that's what I also like about this, if we decide it's not right as we go, we can opt out, but I think we risk more by not trying. So I'm for it.
Okay. Mr. White?
I'm willing to try. Yeah, I think it'd be fine. I am concerned about the cost, but I do see we always negotiate fees. We seek to serve those who serve others. So I look to see some negotiation going on, and we need to keep in mind our budget and what we could be using some of those funds for. So, but if the council feels that we need some team building, I'm all for it. So,
well, what can I say? I've said it. I'm deeply skeptical. I'm obviously the council wants to do this. I'm going to participate in great good faith with respect to it, but I also would hope that after one day we have a good discussion as to whether it's really worthwhile to us to proceed further. So I'm prepared to vote for it, but with the understanding that I have a high degree of skepticism, and I want a real cold review of whether we should continue to spend these dollars after one day.
I applaud the council for your reception that you've given this entire approach. I think let's gamble a little. I think we'll be better for it. And I certainly appreciate your concerns, Mr. Mayor, and I think the city attorney can weave a path for us that will assure compliance with the Brown Act. We don't want that shadow detracting from the quality of discussions that I hope will occur. And I think it's easier as your interim manager to urge you to do this at the personal level than my successor, who might have to carry that baggage for his or her entire tenure here if it goes south. So I think it was timely to bring it up tonight, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you for your consideration.
All right. Do you have enough staff direction with respect to this at this point?
Tom has a comment.
So it'd be important for the city council to take a vote on the resolution, but I would also point out that there is no agreement in the packet. So the motion, to the extent the council is inclined to do so, would be to authorize the city manager to execute an agreement that would be in the city's standard professional services agreement template form, modified to reflect the discussion among the council this evening, for example, about terms such as opting out, obviously in compliance with the Brown Act and like that. But that so the motion would be to adopt the staff report, but also to give direction that the agreement used would be one that would be on our standard professional services agreement template, modified again to reflect the comments of the council this evening.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Black?
Oh, by the way, just one other point, and I forgot to make this point. I'm not sure, but that you all got an email. An email was sent to me today. Well, I had Pam Simpson send an email to everybody stating that the chamber was in fully support of the initiative. Pam had very kind words to say about Gene Holston, had met Gene Holston and expressed her confidence in Gene Holston. So I neglected to state that, but there is an email that was sent out.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Black?
If I can clarify, the resolution does state that it authorizes the city manager to execute the contract on behalf of the city council. I have been working with Jean over the past couple days, just trying to get the insurance and everything lined up, so it is on the city standard professional services agreement. Just because we didn't have a full contract in place by the time the agenda had to be publicized, that's why we didn't include it in it, but the resolution does authorize the city manager to execute it.
And we would coordinate with the finance director to make sure that the additional terms the council is interested in would be reflected in that agreement.
So,
Thank you.
Very good. Ms. Black?
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Ellsworth?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. Democratic centralism wins again. All right. That takes us to our next item, which is a discussion with respect to low-medium residential land use designation as a part of the 2035 general plan update. Mr. Hausch.
Thank you, Mayor Galbraith. The item before the council tonight is, as you mentioned, a discussion of including the low-medium residential land use designation into the 2035 St. Helena general plan update. In April of 2015, the council held a study session on the general plan update and provided direction to staff regarding the creation and inclusion of a new land use designation titled the low-medium density designation into the general plan update. This designation was intended to better fit the existing development patterns of much of the properties in St. Helena, which are currently, residential properties I should say, which are currently designated medium density. And since this meeting, concerns over the low-medium designation have been voiced by several groups, including the Planning Commission. And the concerns were primarily over the creation of non-conforming properties or developments, and then also on impacts on the ability to utilize infill redevelopment to address the housing challenges facing the city. So staff is now in the process of finalizing the EIR, which does analyze the environmental impacts of the 2035 general plan, and it's requesting direction on to whether or not to include this new designation, as it significantly affects the general plan CEQA analysis, as you can imagine, because it would have a significant effect on the overall build-out over that time period. And again, it's worth noting that a majority of the city is designated medium density currently. So staff has included a draft table of the land use designations that are currently existing in the 2035 land use, or currently existing in the 2035 general plan, as well as both land use graphics for reference. Staff did not identify any direct fiscal impacts associated with this discussion. There are some indirect. And staff is recommending that the council discuss inclusion of this designation into the general plan and provide direction to include or remove this designation prior to finalizing the 2035 general plan update and the CEQA analysis supporting it. And that's my presentation.
Any initial discussion? Let me open public comment. Any public comment with respect to it?
Yes, I have a question. No, I was a little distracted when you said what the Planning Commission did. Could you repeat what you said the Planning Commission did on this issue?
The Planning Commission has recommended that the City Council remove this designation from the general plan.
All right, very good. Any further public comment? Let me close public comment. Any discussion by council members? I can certainly lead off, which is to say that I'm prepared to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission. As I see it, if we go down this road, it should be by general plan amendment after the general plan is adopted. And I'm not saying, by saying that, whether I would agree to go down that road at that point in time or not. It's just a matter of process. But I would strongly recommend to my colleagues that we accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission. To remove.
I agree. I think it also, creates some issues regarding internal consistency with our adopted housing element. I think it'll actually help us get to an adopted plan faster, which may have some fiscal impact. I don't know. And I believe the Planning Commission will be recommending that after the plan is adopted, then the city begin to look at the zoning districts in town with more care and attention, and there may be further recommendations that come from that. I heartily support removing this from the plan.
Mr. Ellsworth?
I agree. It should be removed and in taking the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Mr. Doring?
I agree with all that's been said, especially the mayor's notion of keeping an open mind. Somewhere down the road, it could come up again, and so I agree with that. But the statements that Mary made were statements that I would make too, and agree with removing this from the current form of the general plan draft.
I would totally agree, and I would make a motion to, pull it out.
Accept the recommendation.
Accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission
To
remove the low medium density residential land use.
All right. Is there a second?
A second.
All right. Ms. Black?
Councilmember White, Yes. Doring,
Yes.
Coverstein,
Yes.
Ellsworth,
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. You see, Ms. Holston, we're on our best behavior for you. All right.
We're just waiting for her to leave.
This is our next agenda item, 8.4, and this is consideration of proposed approval of a resolution to approve and submit annual housing element progress reports for calendar years 2011 through 2016. And Mr. House, you're up on this one again, too.
Thank you, sir. As mentioned, this is a consideration and proposed approval of a resolution to approve and submit the annual housing element progress reports for calendar years 2011 through 2016. General law cities are required to submit an annual report of to the council, to the Office of Planning and Research, and to the Department of Housing and Community Development, which outlines the progress made towards implementing the city's housing element, which is the section of the general plan. And this is intended to detail local efforts to remove governmental constraints to the maintenance, improvement, and development of housing throughout the city. These reports are required to detail the actions taken by local government towards the completion of the programs in compliance with the deadlines identified in the housing element. So housing elements, as you're well aware, identify numerous goals with specific criteria and deadlines, and this annual report is intended to summarize the city's progress towards it. You will notice in the current 2016 goals report, it does reference the multiple times the commission and city, it references the city council's provided direction to the staff to do an overall review of housing throughout the city, and so it is worth noting kind of in reference to the previous item. The last, unfortunately, the last housing element progress report to the, that was presented to the city council was prepared for the year of 2010. So we are woefully out of compliance with providing those requirements, and I take full responsibility for not bringing them in the last year. But annual progress reports have been prepared for all years, 2011 through 2015, in addition to the that report that was prepared for the current year. And they're included to this report, as attachments to this report. It's worth noting that this application or this item on the council agenda is motivated by the Napa Valley, beyond the requirements of the law, that the Napa Valley Transportation Authority has tentatively approved a grant to the city of over $1 million for sidewalk improvements in the downtown. The award of this grant, however, is contingent upon the city being in compliance with the housing element reporting requirements of HCD. And so as such, this action is intended to not only meet compliance with other elements of the law, but also establish compliance with the unmet reporting requirements and allow the city to accept this grant. Briefly, in 2009, the City Council adopted the 2009 through 2014 housing element, which certified shortly after by HCD. And then in May of 2015, the City Council adopted the next cycle of housing element, which is adopted or applies to the period of 2015 through 2023, and which was also certified by HCD, as you're well aware. This current housing element applies to the 8-year period from 14 to 22 and details how the city plans to accommodate the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA, numbers of 31 units. It's worth noting that RHNA numbers are not a requirement in that there's no penalties associated with not providing the housing numbers that the RHNA identifies, but they are set as a goal for housing units by HCD. The current housing element details goals, policies, quantified objectives, and implementing actions for the development, rehabilitation, and preservation of housing throughout the city, and identifies or is informed by 6 overarching goals that are identified in the housing element. That's kind of some of the most interesting reading, I would say, is the last year, because we didn't have a lot of activity in the previous years. So focus your attention there, and the public should as well. So the annual housing element progress reports for 2011 through 2016 are attached to this report. Details the city's residential unit production, organized by income category. It identifies the number of units rehabilitated, preserved, or acquired by the city. It identifies our progress towards meeting the RHNA allocation numbers for each of those years, and details the implementation status of the current housing element goals, policies, and objectives. It's kind of in a matrix format, so there's not a lot of detail, but it does provide just general information for the public and the commission. As is detailed in the most recent year reports, the city is making good progress towards implementing the 2015 through 2022 cycle of the housing element. And in addition to approving, just to plug some of the things that the city's done, in addition to approving several market rate residential units, new units in the city, the city's also provided funding for both our town, St. Helena, and Calistoga affordable housing, using funds from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which will result in the construction of the Brinkle Court project and the Turley Flats project, or is expected to, which total 16 affordable housing units for low and very low income residents. And that staff anticipates those units being constructed in a combination Proclamation 2017-2018. So we are, from staff's perspective, we are making good progress towards implementing those RENA numbers, and specifically with affordable housing. Staff did not identify any direct fiscal impacts associated with the adoption of these. However, it is worth reminding everyone of the NVTA pending grant. And so, with that, the recommended actions from staff is that the City Council adopt the resolution provided, which approves the annual housing element progress reports for 2011 through 16, and authorize submittal of these reports to the Office of OPR and HCD. They get uploaded directly to their websites. They're available for the public to review, in addition to the being attached to this packet for the public to review.
Well,
So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I would identify a staff impact, which is preparing these reports, and we're most appreciative that you're bringing us forward, and really regret that in prior years that the city did not fulfill this requirement for whatever reason. It surprises me because in some of those years I was serving on the Planning Commission, and I seem to recall that there was some provision for an annual review at the Planning Commission level, and I guess I didn't realize there was an annual requirement for a filing with HCD as well. But now I see that the provision for an annual review by the Planning Commission is no doubt tied into the annual requirement by HCD, something I just didn't know until I saw this, but that's the way it goes.
And I would like to add, this information will be provided to the Planning Commission. It's typical for staff to bring these types of presentations to the Planning Commission first and the City Council second, in case the Commission would like to add anything. However, due to the relatively short nature of the time frame, staff wanted to get this in front of the Commission or the Council in case there are any concerns or questions. We will be presenting it to the Planning Commission as well. And I would like to thank your grants manager, Ms. Prokowski, and consulting planner Lily Bianco, because they primarily prepared this information.
Whatever, it's a lot of paperwork, and most appreciated that we're now up to date, and obviously need to be up to date for this application for a grant. So there we are. Is there any further initial conversation here? Let me open the public comment.
If I could sing, I would sing the words to an old Peggy Lee song, "Is That All There Is?" You know, I'm sure, I don't mean to throw a wet blanket. I can see, Noah, that you're very enthusiastic about this. This is a topic that's very important to some of us in town. I'm on the board of our town, St. Helena. I know it's certainly important to us. I would hope that when you do that presentation to the Planning Commission, that there'll at least be a PowerPoint presentation on the screen. I mean, I saw this report in the past. It was a simple matrix. It was a little spreadsheet with a few numbers filled out on it. It wasn't a big deal. And if that's the same thing you're talking about now, boy, it should have been done all those years. And quite frankly, in the past, I thought it had, I thought it didn't have good information on it. And maybe from the staff standpoint, we're making great progress with affordable housing, but I don't think that's necessarily true to some of the rest of us in town. And I really would like, I'm sorry I did not read the staff report, and I'll admit that. But I will go home and read your staff report. And so I am looking at Noah, and I should be addressing the council. I agree. But I would appreciate when this report is given to the Planning Commission if there could be a couple of PowerPoint slides and a little bit better information for the public. Thank you.
All right, any further public comment? All right, I'll close public comment. Any further council discussion?
I just want to thank staff for putting this together, and while we may not be where we want to be, we're getting moving and getting rolling, and I think that that's important, so thank you and appreciate it.
All right, this time the chair would entertain a motion to approve the submission.
Just one point. There may be a couple of number issues in this report, because I believe in your oral presentation you had mentioned that we're obligated to approve. I don't know what the number is. Is it approve? Anyway, the RENA number is, you said 31. And I see a couple references to 27 in here, and I don't know if that's on page 97 of the report. I just want to make sure we have the right number. And I'm not calling you out on it. I just want to make sure it's right. And I didn't know. I was wondering, well, I always thought it was 31. And then there are a couple typos that we can talk offline about. They're not big deals for me. But.
Just for clarification, too, the housing element law and the attendant RENA obligation obviously doesn't require us to approve the units, but to accommodate their development.
Right. I was looking for the word.
Their
Thank you.
And thank you, Councilmember Doring. You are correct in that the table appears to have a typo in it, and we will correct that prior to submitting.
Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, any further comment? Good catch. Then the chair would entertain a motion to approve the resolution to submit the annual housing element progress reports for calendar years 2011 through 2016 to HCD, with staff authorized to correct any typographical errors brought to its attention.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Black?
Vice Mayor White.
Yes.
Councilmember Coverstein.
Yes.
Ellsworth.
Yes.
Doring.
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. And that takes us to 8.5, which deals with the helipad, and for reasons I explained last time, our family owns the property adjacent to the Paul Moss property, which is inspiring this resolution, and for that reason, as explained last time, I'm going to abstain. So I will leave the room. Okay. Get out quickly here. I'll leave. Cindy, I'm going to leave my book right here for you. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
So as the mayor said, our next item is brought by Councilmember Geoff Ellsworth. You want to go ahead and make a report?
Yeah. This is coming up because of an application for a private heliport in the Napa area that would be precedent-setting in Napa County for more private heliports. Over the last decades, helicopter use has been somewhat limited here, and so the possible disruptions have been somewhat limited to both humans and animals. I've been in communication with groups in the Hamptons where they have considerable helicopter use, private taxi cab sort of helicopter services. The people there that I've spoken to, it's become disruptive of almost every aspect of their lives. Helicopters coming in all hours of the night, all week. And so I think it's important to start discussing that here, what we want in Napa County. The groups I've spoken to were out in the Hamptons, but also there's groups in New York City that I have not heard back from yet, but I've reached out to them. But they have a website called Stop the Chop, and their lives there are being disrupted. So I feel like we need a resolution in St. Helena and the county saying that this kind of use it's incompatible with our agricultural and our rural character. So I've worded this resolution, and I'm certainly open to other thoughts on it. But I can read it and we can discuss it if that sounds.
Sure.
So it says, whereas the use of private heliports will create substantial and unmitigatable impacts to our communities and environment, increased fire and accident risk, noise disruption, increased exposure to aviation fuels and fluids in rural areas, increased trauma to domestic animals and wildlife, disruption of peaceful enjoyment of people's homes, as well as increased CO2 emissions. And whereas the potential for helicopter accidents around our county would increase significantly with private use helicopter ports, and the lack of adequate reporting and compliance mechanisms would leave St. Helena and our other county communities vulnerable to misuse. The resolution, the City Council of St. Helena hereby resolves as follows, that the City Council hereby creates this resolution opposing approval of all private use helicopter ports in Napa County and St. Helena. And that's how I have it worded. If there are any thoughts.
Is there any council discussion? Paul? Oh. Tom?
Just to interject, because in my view, this resolution accomplishes something that really is akin to zoning, that the process for doing something like this, if the council is so inclined, would be to give staff direction to take this to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission would then need to make a recommendation to the City Council on this. Appropriate CEQA review or exemption would need to be examined, and then it would be brought to the council then. But it wouldn't be appropriate to adopt this resolution at this point, but it certainly would be in the council's discretion to give staff that direction to pursue this.
Any other discussion? Mary?
I'm just wondering about the CEQA. How long of a process do you think this would become by the time it goes to the Planning Commission?
I would defer to the planning director to evaluate whether. I mean, it could be that the planning department and director would conduct the initial evaluation and determine that very little of a CEQA process would be required, but some CEQA analysis would be required.
Yeah. So the passage of any land use regulation or ordinance does require CEQA determination, but along the lines, as you're well aware, a denial does not require any CEQA determination. I'm not saying this is a denial, but it's in the vein of, and I believe the CEQA determination would probably not require extensive staff analysis or input, but that's based on a very initial take.
One of the issues is that once the helicopter leaves the ground, that the city and county have no control over the rules. It's governed by the FAA. And what we do have control over is where it lands and how it lands. Whether it's at an airport that's built for this type of thing, or in a rural area where maybe the dangers from the sparking or the wind from the blades, can blow a fire further. So, but that's one issue is that once it leaves the ground, we have no control. So thinking about what we can do on the ground.
Any other discussion? I'll open it up to public comment. No public comment. Okay, seeing none. Is there any other discussion? There's one, I told you before, I'm a helicopter pilot, so I disagree with a number of assertions that you've made in the recitals. And also I went to the environmental impact report for the heliport down in Napa, and the author, or the I don't know what you would call the person that, or the company, the consultant that did the EIR, came up with different points of view of that, yes, all of the things that you mentioned here are mitigatable or are less than significant. So I would suggest, I'm not against having a zoning ordinance in the city of St. Helena for no heliports, because I don't think that there's any place for it anyway. But if the council is concerned about what the county is doing, maybe we can just write a simple letter to the county asking them to let us weigh in on any future heliport projects that would be coming before the County Planning Commission. And in the meantime, if the council so chooses to have a zoning ordinance that specifically eliminates the possibility of having heliports in our own jurisdiction, I think that would be something that would be appropriate for us to look at. I don't think it's imminent that we need to take staff time right now to take a look at that, but that's just my opinion. So anyway, is there a motion to move the, well, I guess it's not appropriate to do or is there direction from council to have staff look at this? Or?
Right. It's hard for the city attorney to tell the city council you can't do it, but it really would be inappropriate for you. It would
understand,
it would violate the planning law and CEQA to do that. But if the council is so inclined to pursue this, the course would be to give to take a vote to adopt a motion to give direction to staff to bring the appropriate zoning change to the Planning Commission after or coincident with undertaking whatever level of CEQA review would be required and appropriate under the circumstances.
Okay.
Separate from that, maybe the just general opinion of the council on helipads, and if the council wishes to direct staff to craft a letter or provide comments to the county of Napa. So it seems like it's two distinct issues.
Yeah, I support both measures, actually. I think there's a cumulative impact here that can begin to disturb everybody if this use becomes prevalent. But I do think we need to learn more about it. So I would be in favor of sending it to the Planning Commission for some review and analysis and a recommendation to us. And I would also support some letter to the county, at least expressing concern about the precedent this might set and what the consequences could be. It's my view.
Well, I'm very sympathetic to the thought process that you detailed in your presentation, and I generally agree with Mary's perspective. When I first saw this resolution, my immediate thought was, where's the supporting evidence? What we have here are a lot of statements, and I'm not into helicopters, and I don't know anything about them. So I'm looking at this language, and my lawyer's brain says, look, we've got to make evidence-based decisions here at the city council level, because if we start, and at the Planning Commission, frankly, if we start doing this without some background information, then who's to stop the next person to come in and say, you know what, I don't like hot air balloons, or I don't like modified motorcycles, and maybe those are legitimate or not. So we have to kind of go through a process, and I'm glad we've outlined it to a certain degree. We have to kind of go through a basic CEQA process. But I would encourage folks to marshal their evidence at the Planning Commission, because I think you'll find, unfortunately, that the evidence is not clear. Frankly, I think you get an EIR. Here it says unmitigatable, but others would say, no, these are all mitigable, whatever the word is.
Mitigatable?
So we can agree or disagree on each one of the points that you have here, and I think it is good to have the Planning Commission sort of grapple with this. I hesitate to send a letter that is too beefy without having our ducks in a row. If a letter comes from us and it says, hey, these things will happen, it says will create. I'm saying may create. We don't. Again, I'm sympathetic.
Oh, yeah, no, I get your point.
I'm really not a fan of having helicopters fly over St. Helena unless it's an emergency. They're going to St. Helena Hospital or or somewhere else. Those kinds of things. So those are my kind of thoughts about it. That we just need to make sure that we have appropriate bases for making the decisions we make.
Should I put together a further statement with more evidence behind it before it goes to the Planning Commission? What?
No, I think first we just need to vote on whether there's direction to bring this up now and have staff time take a look at it and have it brought before the Planning Commission, and also, to put together some kind of letter. But I hesitate to put any more burden on staff at this time when it's not, it's not an emergency thing that we need to deal with in our jurisdiction. Maybe this could be something that when we start taking a look at the zoning ordinances, when we have the general plan, maybe that's a more appropriate time. But, if the council wants to put together a letter to go to the county, I just think that I really agree with Paul's summary here, that it needs to be something that's factual and that has evidence to back it up. So,
I think that kind of letter could simply be limited to saying that the issue has been brought to our attention, and we are going to ask our planning commission to look into it, just so that they know what we're doing. I mean, we don't have to weigh in yes or no, but I think it is important to let them know that we're looking at it.
I'm fine. I'm certainly fine with that. That's appropriate. I think it's along the lines of the direction we gave you to allow you to speak at a Board of Supervisors meeting, that there was, I think we used the word concern.
Yeah.
I don't know what you said, but
that's what I said.
Okay. Okay. So.
Really? No. So is that totally unclear?
I think I could definitely provide a draft letter, work with the city manager to provide a draft letter to the council for their review. Just in the vote on the direction, a timeline would be beneficial to help prioritize staff work.
One thing I will add is that in talking to the people in the Hamptons, this is a very real concern for people, and we have not experienced it yet. And so, I do think that this is happening now in the county. It's happening with one project, but it may be more. And so, to kind of get in front of it a little bit, and I agree, it's not an urgent emergency, but I do think that from my conversations with the people who live with this every day in the flight paths on Long Island, that it can be very, very disruptive. And it's not just the occasional helicopter; it's the quantity. Sure. So anyway, so whereas I don't feel like it's an urgent emergency, I do think it's timely. That's just my.
So would it be able to fit in with when the review of zoning ordinances occur?
It would fit very well with that timeline.
Okay.
I think that one other point bears noting, and a conversation I had with your planning director recently about this was whether and to what extent your current zoning ordinance would allow helipads. And typically, your zoning ordinance is deemed to be what's known as a permissive zoning ordinance, which means that unless something is explicitly allowed in your zoning ordinance, it's deemed to be prohibited. And I think although we haven't done exhaustive research on that issue, I think that it's fair to say that it's likely that your zoning ordinance currently does not allow helipads, and which would give you, I think, some sense of relief or protection if that's the direction that you're expressing this evening, until your planning staff can get to a larger look at your zoning.
Okay. Is that fine? But maybe come up with a letter of concern over the proliferation or possible proliferation of helipads. Thank you. Okay. So we are adjourning. Wait, Mr.
Yes.
Vice Mayor, could I, just for clarification, could I have the complete consensus of what we're directing staff to do? Just for the record.
Okay, I think go ahead.
The direction I heard was to staff draft a letter to bring back for the next council meeting, identifying general concerns over the proliferation of helipads throughout the county, and in particularly within close proximity to St. Helena, and also to include the potential to prohibit or more expressly prohibit helipads within the zoning code update that will happen after the general plan adoption.
Okay. Yes. So I will adjourn our meeting in memory of Juan Diaz, and thank you all for being here. Thanks.
Thank you.